Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of That Thing We Call Till Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, and of course, watching us live on YouTube is the best way to interact with the show. It's how you become a full-fledged member of the show where your comments come in real time, even if you can't watch it live. Like Chris Ferrara says, sorry, going to have to catch the replay this week, hashtag LFGM, but then always with the kind words, have a good show, and we appreciate that. John Saponaro out in Los Angeles, California, where I honestly don't even know what's happening anymore with LA. It's the best part is that it's green, it's beautiful, it's lush. There's no drought conditions, but the drawback is everything's flooded. The freeways, the streets, there's mudslides. It's awful. It's awful. And then this morning it was like 45 degrees. This afternoon, 70 degrees. No idea. Don't know what to do. Cannot figure it out. But anyway, I'm here and I'm doing good. I'm feeling good for more reasons than just our New York Mets. Of course, today we'll talk about that a little later. But yes, it's John Saponaro holding things down on the West Coast, and my co-host back east in New Jersey, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Ibby, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, John. It's been a little bit of a runaround of a week. I know you've had your travel. I've had my issues on my end when it comes to sick children and dealing with everything and the runaround of all that nonsense. But we're back. It's Wednesday. Record is on. The red light's on. I'm excited because I had said, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, I said I was going to take a shot and I was going to say, look, I want to try to get this guy on the show. I've really been enjoying his work over at The Athletic, and hopefully he'll respond and we can get this to work. And lo and behold, he's here. He's here this week. He's here to talk. So I'm excited that he's here. It's going to be great. And let's do it. Let's talk Mets. Let's get into it.
Listen, I am looking forward to it. And of course, thanks to everybody who tuned in and all our guests last week. We did a little departure from our normal Mets episode and really broke down the rules, the new rules in the MLB with our excellent panel. And now we can kind of put that in the rearview mirror, hopefully, until, and I'm sure something will happen that directly affects our New York Mets over the course of a season, and those rules are going to rear their head. It's not the last time we're going to hear about it, but we're also going to try to not bring it up each and every single week because it just makes for uninteresting television after a while. But having said that, Ibby, I was kind of shocked that people were like, John, you played it too straight as the moderator. We were looking for Hollywood John. We were looking for hater John. And I was like, well, I was just trying to be a good host. We had a lot of people, a lot of voices.
I thought you did a fantastic job. You did a great job. Really.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So I appreciate that. But I guess I'm going full heel this week. Who knows what is going to happen. I rage ordered a PS5 because I can't wait to play MLB 2K, MLB The Show 23. So, look, that's the kind of life I'm leaving. Anyway, let's bring in our guest. I'm excited to talk to this guy. I'm excited to get back into the Mets-centric situation that this show is known for. So, without further ado, let's bring him on. It's the one and only Will Sammon from The Athletic. Will, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining the show.
Thank you, Will.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. For the record, I thought you guys did do a good job with the rules panel, but happy to help you guys revert back to your Met-centric chat.
I appreciate that. We were trying to get a group of opinionated and knowledgeable people, and we didn't talk to them ahead of time. So there was no like, oh, for the sake of the live stream, we're going to get people who disagree. Because I just knew there were too many rules and too many, baseball purists versus new school versus, people just who didn't necessarily, who had opinions you wouldn't necessarily expect. So I knew that there would be some headbutting moments, but it was good. And I felt like the viewers wanted a breakdown of the new rules and just wanted to hear what some other people thought, because listen, there's a lot of purists that watch this show and listen to this show, Will, and they were like, I don't think I like any of them. So
yeah. No, I understand. It's going to grow on people for sure.
Look, you know what? I said we weren't going to do it, but now I just want to know, because you cover baseball for a living. The games are shorter, and that's probably good news for everybody. So this is the only thing I'm going to throw your way with regards to the rules. But how do you feel about just watching baseball in general?
I never had a problem with length of game. It was never something that really bugged me quite a bit. I understand why it would bug other people, and I do get it. And I think it's a good step toward getting people with shorter attention spans into the fold or back into the fold of viewing baseball. So for that, I'm all for it. So personally, I didn't really care. I didn't really have a big gripe about time of game. It didn't bug me too much. So no, it doesn't bother me. I think that I think the rule changes, they're going to take some time for people to get used to, and for myself included, to kind of like I was watching the Mets spring training game today because I'm home and I go back to Port St. Lucie tomorrow. And Keith Hernandez made the comment of like having to keep tabs on the amount of pickoff moves now. Mm-hmm. And like that's part of the deal too, right? Like you're jotting it down, like making sure like, okay, he's up to number 1, he's up to number 2. It's like this like, really tedious thing. But yeah, no, I mean for the most part I get it, right? Because like I think people want more action in the game. And so for that I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's funny because you're talking to two people who kind of feel the same way. And, I'll sit down and watch baseball for 4 hours. And then as soon as the game ends, I'll flip over like on the baseball package and find the team I don't even care about and watch that game when it's over. So I get it from that perspective. Obviously, we got the World Baseball Classic going on. Before we dive into the Mets stuff, Will, do you like the World Baseball Classic? Is it something you're a fan of? What's your take on the WBC?
Yeah, by law, my girlfriend's she works for a WBC, so by law, I have to enjoy the WBC.
Good answer. Good answer. Just blink really twice fun into the camera if you're okay.
No, the tournament's really cool. I think I enjoy it. I like seeing different players. Like I think like the different group of players that the U.S. has. I wish that the restrictions were different. I do wish that Max Scherzer had some interesting comments about playing it like mid-season or something like that. The hard thing is that you're just never going to find like a time where it makes sense for like MLB players. It's just this part of it isn't great because it's part of the ramp up, but it's probably the most ideal because guys are ramping up instead of like going into November when guys are looking to shut down and they're used to being shut down at that point. And then you go into the whole cycle of like, well, this dude's playing for a contract or this guy's an arbitration. There's a whole cluster of issues that would come up if you changed it. So I don't know if there's a great time to play it, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy watching the games. It gives you a different element rather than like the spring training games that are fine to watch, but after a while they get kind of old and they're like, after the 6th or 7th inning, it's like, okay, time to turn channel on this. Whereas the WBC, like that's when it actually gets like kind of interesting because, we see some lopsided games, but we also see some tight scores where we see teams like rack up a lot of runs in the beginning of a game and then, cough it right back up because of the pitching issues.
Yeah. I don't think
absolutely.
I don't think Ibby, there's a good time to play this. I agree. People are like, oh yeah, November, but like Will said, and I think there's another
long season.
Well, and then what about guys who maybe are going to go play for other countries, right? Because they have eligibility there, but they're in AA or AAA. It's like you don't want a potential prospect who's used to playing a shorter season now have to ramp back up in November. Right. And I would be livid. Could you imagine if the Mets are 10 games in first place and then we stop baseball for 2 weeks?
Right.
Like
and then someone would get hurt and then the season would be like it'd be a nightmare in that scenario. But just to talk to the excitement real quick, I thought it was cool because on Saturday, I had my fantasy baseball draft with my friends that we've been doing for the longest time. And we're sitting there. And then once we finally finished, the Team USA game came on and I thought it was just really cool that for like one day, because it's a collection of Mets, Yankees, Red Sox fans. So we all have our allegiances. And then just like for one day, we're all standing there, we're all surrounding the TV and we're all cheering and rooting for the same team. It's like, we don't get to do that often. And it was just really cool to watch all, the stacked lineup and loaded lineup that the U.S. has. And of course, just making fun of Great Britain's uniforms. But besides that, we, just in general, we were having a great time with that. And it's just really cool. And I like the fact that I know everyone says it's just an exhibition. It's whatever about pride, but it means a lot to a large amount of these players, and they wear it on their sleeve and they go out there and they play hard. And you're seeing what Lindor is doing. And you're seeing, the excitement that's surrounding this Team Puerto Rico versus Team Dominican Republic game and all the stuff. So I'm all for it. I love what I'm watching, and it, just giving me playoff baseball over spring training baseball. Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And then there's people in the comments that are hyped up about it. Carlos Ramos saying, today we talk about Puerto Rico's baseball team, followed up by baseball and BBQ saying big game tonight, DR versus DR. Absolutely. So I think all of that stuff is well represented, not only in the comments here, and there's more. We don't have to read off all of them, but it's true. Carlos also saying, Yes, please, John. I can't stand babyface John. Following it up by saying Hollywood John is the character that goes over, brother. So let's dive into these Mets, Will. Like, obviously you cover them, you know them intimately. You said you just left Port St. Lucie, you're headed back to Port St. Lucie. So, everybody knows the storylines that everybody's aware of. But for you, somebody who's been in close contact with the team, what's been your biggest takeaway from the Mets spring training thus far?
Well, Tim Burton and I have covered the Mets for The Athletic. We ran through a few questions kind of at the midway point last week about like what was like the vibe around the team, maybe some things that stood out to us, some developments that we thought were more interesting than others. For me, it's like I was somebody that jumped into this beat last summer. I covered the Brewers for like the previous 3 seasons. So like I got into this job last year, midway through the season, and I didn't really get to experience like some of the characters that are part of this story for the Mets. I didn't get to experience a whole lot of getting to know Max Scherzer or Francisco Lindor. I did here and there, but there's only so much you could build as far as a relationship goes late in the summer when guys are battling in the middle of a pennant race. So from my standpoint, it's been kind of cool to see how this group goes about their business, because this is a really a veteran group, an accomplished group. And the demeanor that they have, talking about like a guy like Justin Verlander, who just goes through the day, knows exactly what he wants to do, pretty much at any given moment. It's really incredible just to observe him and see him just go through his day, how efficient he is with his work. And so just guys like that, I think, stand out to me as far as like keeping tabs on who they are, what their personalities are like. For me, I just think they have a really good mix of dudes in this clubhouse when it comes to guys who I'd mentioned like that, like very accomplished veterans, but also like those younger guys like a Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez, a group of pitchers who are coming through the system now too. And I think when you project the team out from like 3-4 years from now, this type of season or this type of spring training or ramp up for those guys is going to prove to be invaluable in a lot of ways. Because yeah, sure, maybe they're not going to break camp with the major league roster, but like to be part of this group, it's really unique to get to experience this. And I don't think people really understand that or they won't until the season unfolds and you see like, Justin Verlander suit up in a Mets uniform on that first day he pitches. People are used to it from seeing DeGrom. We got a taste of it with DeGrom and Max last year. But it really wasn't enough. And I just feel like a guy like Justin Verlander, like his ticket is already punched to the Hall of Fame. Like the guy's going. It's not a conversation. And he's suiting up for the Mets. And I think that's just, from somebody who grew up in Queens, it's pretty incredible to see like, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander suit up for this team. Also, by the way, with like a host of all these position players. So I think we get a little bit greedy in New York. And like, we want this, we want that. It's a pretty damn good team. It's a pretty good roster. And so for me, like, that's like the thing that stands out is like long-winded way of saying like, dude, this team has a lot of stars.
Yeah, they do.
The clubhouse and it's loaded.
And you know what? New York has become, again, a place for stars after kind of not seeing it to the same level for like, I don't know, feels like a full decade when you look over at what's going on with the Jets today with Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, the stuff in Brooklyn didn't work out with Kyrie and KD, but they were here in addition to James Harden. He was here for a moment in time. And then you look at, you look at a situation where the Mets have Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer. The Jets are about to get Aaron Rodgers. The Rangers have Patrick Kane. Like, I don't care how old some of these people are. You're talking about some of the best to ever do it in their respective sports at their respective positions. And Ibby, as a Mets fan, to take it back full circle, we lived through the doldrums where that was never a possibility. You were going to get Max Scherzer when he was 40 but washed. You weren't going to get Max Scherzer where you had to pay him $45 million a year to come here and be an ace. That's what we were used to. We were used to like, gee, I sure hope Michael Kadyr's got one good year left in him.
God.
And boy, don't he? No, he didn't. He didn't.
Oh my God! And the fact that they gave up the 11th overall pick to sign Michael Kadyr too. Like, what a waste that was. But yeah, it is awesome to see New York back on the rise in general, because for the longest time it seemed as though, across all sports, New York was just in a spot where, when they were comparing it to the other cities and places like, oh, look at New York in comparison to Boston or all these other places or LA. It's like New York wasn't doing well for a very long time. And now it's great to see stars coming back and teams playing well. Look, we had two, the 200 win teams last year in baseball. It's just like this. It's great to see New York on the rise in general. And yeah, like you said, like the fact that the Mets are here now and they're a part of it, like they're in the center of it. And the fact that you are the talk of the town for the most part, it's like, it's an awesome thing. And, look, money spent the way it was, expectations are extremely high. The second that first pitch is thrown, the heat is on this team, and they know it. We know it as fans, and it's going to be great. Look, we know that there's going to be a lot of back and forth. And if there's one thing I must ask, Will, I have to ask you this question. You're on the Mets now. You covered the Brewers. Could you explain to me, in your own words, the difference between covering the Brewers and the Mets in terms of the fan bases?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go into like a salary question.
No, I wasn't going to bother with that one. I wasn't going to bother with that one.
There were some days where I was like, okay, I don't have to I had to look up what the luxury tax is. I didn't. I'm kidding, but
Will's like, what's the difference? I don't know, like $200 million.
No, the Brewers have a way of doing things that they've had a lot of success with, and they've made it work. But yeah, it's definitely a different animal in the salary and the money conversation. But as far as the fan base goes, I think that's part of it though. I bring up the money because that's what drives everything, right? So the money drives the expectation. So with the money being spent the way it is here, I think that there's a difference of okay, this is not good enough. No matter what they do, it's not going to be quite good enough sometimes. And that's great. That's the level that you want to be at, I think, as a fan, right? You don't want to take that step back and be like, oh, look how great we are. We want to look at the flaws. And I think that's the difference between people who grew up in New York, I think, as fans, as a sports fans particularly, a little bit more cynical, I guess, but a little bit more critical, a lot more critical, I guess I would say. That's to me the biggest difference, because I grew up here, but I bounced around quite a bit professionally, and I covered different teams in different cities, from small towns in the Southeastern Conference for college football to covering UF to covering the Brewers and now the Mets. So I've seen a full spectrum of okay, these are what certain fan bases are like. And for me, the Mets, it's definitely of that. I think it's a little bit partially because of just the history of the franchise, where you're kind of expecting things to go wrong too. Part of it, right? Mm-hmm. You're expecting that shoe to drop and be like, oh crap, this is what it is. But also your eyebrows should raise them because of the age of Justin Verlander, or there are certain questions about whether or not this rotation is going to be fully healthy throughout the duration of the season, right? Those are serious questions. People are right to ask them. People are right to raise the points of hey, did we do enough for the offense? We had they're running back the same lineup. Is it enough? And I think sometimes those are questions that maybe different fan bases don't ask, or maybe they don't ask as loudly as the Mets one would, or any other larger market team would. So that to me is the biggest difference, is they're not Mets fan base, and really to big market teams in general, they're not going to be they're not going to be easily satisfied. Not saying the Brewers fans are, it's just, it's a different level of expectations that come with it. And to appease those, or to, fulfill those, it takes a lot more work, I think.
Yeah. And, it's funny because I think that with the money comes the expectation, like you said. With the market sometimes comes the expectation, and everybody wants to win, right? That's where it's driven. But I don't know if you guys heard or saw what Damian Lillard said in a recent interview, basically saying how he doesn't like the way the NBA has trended, where it's a different league than the one he even came into just a few years ago. Everything is, if you don't win a title, it's a failure. If you don't win a title, it's a failure. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing we measure it. And, somebody asked him hey, Dame, time to win a championship. He's like, you don't think I want to win a champion? What am I here for? Why would I be doing this? We all want to win a title, but 90% of the league, or 99% of the league, however the math shakes out, doesn't win one. Every year, only one team wins.
Right.
And so I do think that being in the conversation, it's not I think Yankee fans have been spoiled to this, Will, where it's being good every single year with a chance to go deep in the playoffs is all you can ask. And the dude catches a lot of flack, and sometimes rightfully so. But a couple years ago, when Andy Martino came out and said, hey, it's an unreasonable expectation to try to build a team to win a World Series, I think he said it wrong, but I think at the crux of what he was saying, you can't. Sometimes you just have to build the best team you can and let the chips fall where they may, especially the way baseball's been over the last few years. It's not a crapshoot, but it's pretty damn close. Anybody think the Phillies were going to the World Series last year?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
I mean, come on. So, for me, I look at you. You have to have that want and desire. And I think, Patty says, Verlander was fired today, and he was. And then he came out and kind of said something that we're talking about now, Will, and something that you alluded to before in terms of the chemistry in this clubhouse, where he was like, look, I'm not afraid to talk about winning. I think that people need to kind of build off of that. And I think you build a winning culture by bringing it up. So what were your thoughts on what he said, how he said it, and how he can lead by example, both on and off the field?
Yeah, that dude's a pro. Like, he's been there, done that, right? American League Cy Young Award winner after coming off of Tommy John. At age 39, statistically, it was the best age 39 season I think we've ever seen. I looked up the numbers. Nobody's done that. I mean, it's just, you could compare errors and you could quibble with it, but like, nobody's done what that guy did at age 39. It's remarkable, really is. And I think that sets the tone. Like what you were saying about like the difference of like opinions and difference of like expectations. Like, look at the Brewers, like, for instance, right? Like, they had made the playoffs, I think, 3 times in a row. That was a franchise record. And like, that was good. Yeah. Now those expectations are higher because like they've won. Mets, you can kind of run that same parallel. Like, okay, it was just a one season, but like, you won 101 games and you got bounced early in the playoffs. That's not going to be good enough this time. Like, Buck Showalter was asked during the early days of spring training about winning 100 games. I think he didn't say this way that I'm going to say it, but the amount of wins in the regular season, it doesn't really matter as long as you're getting in. As long as you're getting in, perhaps winning your division, if that matters to you too, probably it should based on the way the playoffs are structured these days. That does have meaning to it where you maybe bypass that first round this time. So like that's a thing, but as far as like whether if you win 98 who cares? I think it comes down to you got to get beyond that round. And I think that's a fair expectation, even given the context of what you said, John, about just you can't really say like if you lose in say the NLCS that's a failure of a season. Disappointing, sure. I don't think that would be a failure, right? I think that's a little obtuse to go that far. So I think Justin Verlander with his comments, he's just really setting a tone, and I think that's something that Max Scherzer established last year by all accounts, right? Like he was a dude that like just said like this is what it takes. A lot of these guys aren't used to it. A lot of these guys haven't gone through it. 2015 was a long time ago. Most of these players weren't on the roster then. So yes, you have accomplished guys like Pete Alonso and McNeil and other players, but like they hadn't been through the run, right? They hadn't been through that pennant chase, and if they did, it was in a very, very minor role back then for somebody like Brandon Nimmo, for instance, right? Like that was a long time ago. It didn't really register. You weren't carrying the load. So I think they're better for it from what they experienced last year. It's kind of cliche to say that, but I think it's accurate. And yeah, I think what Verlander said has a lot of weight because he's going into the season knowing that maybe he wants to play an extra handful of seasons. I don't know, but he's not 30 years old anymore. He's not here for fun. Like he chose this team. He chose this path. Like he believes that this is going to be a winner. Like he's not going there. Like the guy has goals. Like, I don't know if he's going to outright say that he wants 300 wins, but like we could all do the math and we could all kind of figure it out. Maybe that's a goal for him. If it is, he's not going to pitch for the Washington Nationals, right? He's not going to go to who's going to pay him the most money. He was always going to get this amount of money regardless. So it came down to which team do you want to play for the next 2 years or so. He chose the Mets. I mean, that says something to where the franchise is at. But it also says something that this dude thinks that this team could win a championship, and that's what his expectations are coming here. It's not just to get paid the most money because he was going to get paid regardless. He could have went to the Dodgers, probably got the same contract.
Yeah, it's funny, and I got to run the parallels again just because I also am a Jets fan and the Aaron Rodgers stuff. Like, there is a difference between look, I understand you don't get these guys for the long haul. You're not getting Scherzer in his prime or Rodgers or Verlander, but you are getting players who are still operating at a very high level, who know what it takes to win. And then, Ibby, you look at everything that Will just said, like, they also have options because of how good they are and what they're chasing down in their own individual careers. So I think getting somebody who knows what it takes to win, knows what it takes, like, they're going to go get theirs no matter what. But now when they join a team, to say, I'm Justin Verlander and I want to pitch, think I can win a championship here, that's all you need. That's Ibby. That's all you need.
No, absolutely. And it's also, look, it's also because, yes, we know, like, if you say this to anyone else, they're going to say he went someplace because they paid him the most money. Look, any player is going to want the most money. Yes, sure. He chose a path that really checked off everything that he wants. It's money. It's an opportunity to win a championship. It's an opportunity to reach those goals and milestones that Will was just alluding to. I want to say he's like, maybe, I did the math like a couple weeks ago. I want to say he's like 54 games maybe away from 300 wins. Yes, it might go beyond those 3 years, obviously, that he signed here for, but it's clearly a path that, based off the way the guy's talking about his body and treating himself, it's something that he's probably eyeing up, because he very well may be the last 300 game winner. When you look at everyone else, he could be the last guy. So I really think that that's something that is going to push him and drive him to want to stay healthy, to keep on treating himself well, to try and get to this point.
Carlos Ramos is kind of furthering what you're saying. Verlander and Max are the last real starting pitchers left.
It's really true. And to bring back a point from before, just talking about what Will was saying about what these guys can do to the clubhouse and everything. It's like I mentioned this episodes back as well, just saying how, yes, they're not going to be here a long time, but the things that they instill now with the players that are going to be here for a long time, that is what's going to carry on no matter what, which is why you want players like this, regardless of the age that they are, in your clubhouse, to instill this thought process and this mentality into your players that are going to be here. The McNeils, eventually the Alonsos, the Lindors, the Nimos, those guys can take those words and carry it and move it forward. So that's why having a player of the caliber of a Max Scherzer and a Justin Verlander is so awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's switch gears completely before we head into the break. And for everybody watching for the first time ever, the break's just 10 seconds. It's an ad spot we have to do for the audio version of this podcast. Joining us this week is Will Sammon from The Athletic. Well, let's change gears, talking about the veterans, talk about some of the kids as we head into the halfway point of the show. Good spring so far. Excellent for Mauricio, for Beatty. Vientos looks good. You know, it's kind of strange to see Alvarez being the quote-unquote forgotten man a little bit of that group. But look, I think we could take Alvarez off the table because of the position that he plays and because of the importance of where the Mets want him to be, 6 months from now, a year from now. But of the other three, I think there are more clear avenues for them to potentially wind up on this team, maybe not breaking camp with the team, but sooner rather than later. So where do you put the likes of Vientos, Mauricio, Beatty? I know spring training is spring training. You got to take it with a grain of salt, but they're all still doing it and they're all still highly touted players. So you can't wipe it completely.
No, I think that of the group, Beatty has stood out the most to me for a couple of reasons. One, I just really like his at-bats that he's had. A lot of people have kind of pointed to Mauricio's power, and that's great. That's awesome. But for Mauricio, it's going to come down to balls and strikes. You got to make good swing decisions. We have to see that for the duration of more than spring training, and we have to see that more than spring training at-bats in the 8th inning. And I hate to take any credit away from him, but he's got to prove it, and I think he is proving it. He's just got to continue to do it. With Beatty, what stands out to me is just his approach just is a lot more mature than his age is. You see him come to the plate. He has that presence to him, big-bodied kid, muscular build. Just he looks the part, right? So he shows up and it's okay, this guy's a player. And then he kind of shows it though. He goes the opposite field with his power. Doesn't try to do a whole lot when he goes up the middle. Just a really solid approach at the plate. Knows the zone. Looks like getting better at that too. Getting better at knowing which pitches to do damage on, I think, is the key for him, and he's showing that, right? I think he had a hit, whether it was yesterday or today, that was just a base hit right up the middle. So he's not trying to just like win the job here. Like he's trying to do what he's been taught to do, really since last year, right? Where he's becoming more of like a complete hitter, I guess is the way to say it. So that stands out to me. As far as like their paths, I think you're right, John, with what you said about Alvarez. It's funny that he's like a forgotten dude. Like last year, my first story with the Athletic covering the Mets was about Francisco Alvarez. Now it's probably going to take me 3 weeks into camp before I write about him, like just on an individual level. So like that's just kind of a funny aside. But for the Pats, look, I don't know if it surprises me a whole lot if like Brett Baty doesn't break camp with his team. I think we've all been kind of prepared to feel like he won't. Just because of what Billy Epler and Buck Showalter has said about defense and about how they prioritize that. And look, the guy's not going to come up for a part-time role either. He's not going to come up and like DH here and there.
And he shouldn't.
No doubt.
Right.
That's going to hinder his development. I think the same thing is kind of with Vientos. I think they're kind of a little, I'm not reporting this, but just my own opinion that like I think they may be a little bit afraid to like put him in that role of like a rough where he's like playing, once every 4 days or so against a left-handed starting pitcher, because that kind of screws with your development if you're doing that with a younger guy. So I think that's kind of a thing. But as far as Beatty goes, I think that they're going to want to start him in AAA, just my guess, and just have him play there every day. I had people tell me during the winter like that this is what was going to happen. He was going to go into spring training, and Eduardo Escobar was going to go to play for Team Venezuela, and Brett Baty was going to tear it up, and everybody was going to be like, hey, what about this dude? Right. And that's happened. He's a very, very good hitter. That's not going to change. They want him to be a good defender as well. Not to say that Eduardo Escobar isn't, I don't think he's like the greatest third baseman defensively these days.
No, and I think he's regressed a little bit too.
Right.
Yeah.
But he is more of a sure hand, I would say. Like you kind of know what you're getting. He can make the routine play. A lot of times what we've seen with Brett Baty is like when he has a second to kind of think about things, that's when we see a miscue with a throwing error. Like he kind of overdoes it a little bit. When he's put in these positions where he just has to make an athletic play, whether he's like ranging to his left or making a play, play to the line or something like that, he makes it for the most part, and it looks outstanding. And we see the highlights on SNY, like on Twitter and stuff. Like it looks dazzling. But I think it's more like he has to make the routine play, and you can't hold your breath when the ball's hit to him and be like, okay, is this going to be an error? No, it has to be made. So I think that's where they're at with him. His bat's going to play. I think with Vientos, as far as path goes, it kind of depends. I mean, like I said about just the idea of like not wanting to hinder his development by being in that weak side platoon of seeing left-handed starters. I feel like that could be a thing, right? Because that's a tough job. And I think that's part of where Darren Ruff struggles. Tough job. That said, Darren Ruff continues. If he continues to struggle, they have a decision on their hands. What do they do with that spot, right?
What do you think? I'm not asking you to report anything because Ruff seems to, you look around the bench, Guillorme's going to be there. They're going to have a backup catcher. It's more than likely, or a 50-50 catcher with Narvaez and Nito. Tommy Pham signed to play, be the fourth outfielder, maybe DH sometimes. And now all of us and Vogelback. And so it's really coming down to this Darren Ruff spot. Tim LeCastro brings something that Darren Ruff does not bring. I think Tim LeCastro is probably, if he makes the team, is going to be like the dude from Stony Brook last year. Oh, Jankowski, where it's like, he's a flash in the pan. He gives you some stuff in April and May, and then he's off the team. I think that's possible. But I don't know, with what I've seen from Darren Ruff all of last year to all of this spring so far, how you can justify having Ruff on the roster.
Yeah, it would be tough. It really would. And he also has the issue, I think, with his wrist as well. I don't know. Does he start the season on the IL, even though he's playing now? Is that part of this? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, right? Like, that's a great
comment. An extended spring just to bring someone else up, maybe. Yeah,
perhaps. But what I would do, right? This would be just based on my fantasy world, right? Like, speculative guess. What I would do. I would start the season with Tommy Pham as my guy seeing left-handed starters at DH, have Daniel Vogelback against right-handers, and I'd start the season probably with LeCastro, and I have Pham and LeCastro as my backup outfielders because LeCastro's, he's going to give you a speed element with these new rules, of course. Maybe that's helpful, and even if he's not, maybe even if he is like a Jankowski kind of situation, maybe those 1 or 2 months buy you time with Vientos. Or maybe it figures out a situation where maybe Escobar becomes your DH and Beatty's ready to play every day at third base. I don't know, but maybe that buys you the time that you need with a couple of those younger guys.
And, Ibby, this is kind of the repeat of what you and I talked about at the trade deadline last year. Once the Mets got Vogel back, they locked themselves into having one player on the roster that does one thing well and can't play defense at all. So then when the rumors started swirling about JD Martinez, we're like, well, you can't have two guys like that. It doesn't matter if there's a permanent DH. It doesn't matter about National League style baseball anymore. You simply can't do it. Then it reared its head again in the postseason when I was like, you can't carry Daniel Vogelbach and Terrence Gore together. They're barely one baseball player. You can't have two. And I think now you're revisiting the fact that, okay, you could stick Darren Ruff in left field or right field. He could back up every once in a while for Pete at first base, and they don't really have a true backup at first base, but he's not good in any of those spots. So if he's not hitting, he doesn't offer you anything. And I think everything that Will just brought up, if you let Tommy Pham be the right-handed portion of the platoon at DH and also get some spots here or there in the outfield, and you go with LeCastro, all of a sudden you start to open up what Buck likes to do and what modern baseball is, which is mixing and matching all over the diamond. So to me, that makes the most sense. I don't think if Vogelbach's on this team and for $1.5 million for the power he has with the limitations to the shift, the list goes on and on, he's going to be and he should be. You can't have Vogelbach and Ruff. I don't care. To me, it doesn't make sense from a 26-man roster.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And to continue what Will was saying, which I think, I get it. It's rec specs, it's fantasy potentially, but at the same time, what you brought up, it makes a lot of sense because based off of what I've seen so far in the spring, and look, this could just be working the kinks out, getting your feet back under you, but I haven't been that impressed with Tommy Pham in the outfield. So the idea of him being out there, even on a limited basis, is not something that I really want to see that often. And I know people thought automatically, he'll be the guy who's going to be backing up Nimmo in center. It's like, based off of what I've seen, I'm not really sure if that's the move. So if you're going to tell me he's the right-handed DH for that platoon, that makes a little bit more sense, which is why I can see LeCastro breaking camp and being that outfielder to fill that role. Because for a team that is going to be built, and we'll talk more about the pitching in the second half, but for a team that's built on pitching for the most part, because you have to get the most out of those arms, you want to have good defense behind them, and you want to make sure that you're getting everything that you can out of those defensive spots 1 through 9. Doesn't matter where it is. So if you're going to put someone out there that's a butcher, I don't see it flying. So if you're going to tell me Pham's DHing more so than being in the outfield, I can buy that more with LeCastro out there as opposed to having Pham out there and filling in someone else on the bench.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence either. Maybe it is, or maybe they're just trying to build up some depth at other spots. I don't know for sure, but we've seen Mark Hanna play a little bit of first base. We've seen Yorme, Buck Showalter talk about him as an option at first base. So when you talk about backups for Pete Alonso, who he's going to play every day, right? It's not necessarily high on your priority list, but it's one of those things where you want to have an idea of what you're going to do. And also he needs some DH days probably, right? So I think that's worth bringing up too, is just that there are other guys who are capable of playing every once in a while at first base if you need them to. And I've seen Daniel Vogelbach play a little first base too. He's really he's not the worst first baseman, right? That's not I know that's not the best compliment to give a guy, but I think he's probably a little bit better than people would think actually. It's just that he just doesn't do it. So that's also a consideration. I think that's worth bringing up, is that he's a little bit better, I would say, at least from somebody who's watched him play first base before, than what people would assume.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. Randy Wilkins brings up a good point. We'll head into the break after this. Well over the halfway mark now. I have nothing against Ruff, but his contribution to this team reminds me of Jed Lowry, and I think that's fair, because I think everything that you guys just mentioned in terms of player rotation makes more sense than Darren Ruff. I would rather see Mark Canha back up at first base. Shea saying he played first base for Oakland too. I would rather see Mark Canha or Starling Marte back up for Nimmo in center field for a day here, a day there, if you don't want it to be Tommy Pham, and then put Pham in one of the corner spots. I just think the more you move stuff around, and then your point about Vogelbach, Will, is a great one, where it's look, You've seen him do it. He's not the best, but he's certainly not the worst. I mean, that's how I would categorize Darren Ruff playing first base too. So, I think with all of those guys, it just seems to be that, Ruff is the odd man out unless he was going to come here and absolutely light it up this spring, which he hasn't. That said, guys, we're 40 minutes into the show or just about. So we got about 20 minutes to play with, still a lot to cover. We're going to take a quick break, 10 seconds, and then we'll be right back live on Twitter, live on YouTube. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, till Mets do us part. Our guest this week, Will Sammon from The Athletic. We will be right back. Yo, what's going on, everybody? Just like that, 10 seconds, we are back. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, our guest this week, Will Sammon from The Athletic here on Till Mets Do Us Part, returning to all things New York Mets after last week kind of going around MLB and talking about all the league rules and all the new stuff that's changed and all that stuff. Now we're back deep diving on spring training with our Mets. Will, before we get back into the conversation, look, people follow you on Twitter, of course, because Mets Twitter is super active, but in case they don't, this is their first time hearing from you and they're like, hey, I want to follow this guy, I want to read his stuff, where can they find you online and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks again for having me. It's been a blast. On Twitter, I'm at Will Sammon, WILLSAMMON, and you can find our work on the Mets. We have two people covering the team, me and Tim Britton, on The Athletic. So theathletic.com is your spot. I think we're running probably a $2 sale, I think, for the next 3 months or so. So good time to join if you haven't. And I appreciate people who continue to read our coverage.
Perfect. Awesome. And yeah, thank you for being here and giving us some of your time, especially as somebody who travels a lot this time of year. I understand what it's like to land somewhere, be home for a couple days, and then be like, I'm leaving tomorrow, because I am also leaving tomorrow. So I completely get it from that perspective. Let's talk about the pitching. Now, obviously, we've had some good news, some bad news on the pitching side, most notably with Jose Quintana, and it's great that it's not cancer. That stuff is, a beyond baseball, great news for him, but he's still going to be out, they say, until I think June or July at this point, second half of the year. So that's not good. Then we get the news on Montes de Oca, which is not as bad as we thought it could have been. Forearms, always an allusion to perhaps Tommy John. It's a stress reaction, more like maybe a month away from returning. Some good news on Brooks Raley. So when we look at this pitching staff, start to finish, obviously you mentioned before, rotation, a little bit older, a little bit uncertain. Of course, I have to mention the issue that Kodai Senga had, but now that seems fine. He's throwing in full. Everything's all good to go. Let's start with the rotation first, because there's very clearly an open spot there, Will. Who do you think it goes to? Is it Tyler Megill? Is it David Peterson? Is it a little bit of a dark horse, like a guy like Joey Fuego? Probably not, probably too early for it to be him, but where do you go with that?
I think a lot of it may come down to perhaps who they're playing. I mean, maybe it's better suited for a right-hander like Megill against whoever it is that he lines up against. I don't know. Or maybe it's a lefty, right? Maybe it depends on the lineup, perhaps, kind of thing. I could see that playing it out that way, where it's like, you have two guys who are kind of in the same boat as far as development goes and as far as where they're at in their careers. They both have things you like about them as far as stuff goes. They both have things where you kind of quibble with, and that's why they were kind of on the outside looking in, and they weren't sure things heading into the season as far as roles go, right? Or even into the offseason, I should say. That's why the Mets decided to upgrade their rotation and to have 5 starters that were not named Megill or Peterson heading into the spring. So that said, there's plenty to like about these guys, but I think that there isn't a whole lot that separates them. I think that both of them were counted on at different parts of the season last year, right? So you go up and down the list and compare and contrast, there isn't a whole lot for me that separates them. Plus the fact that they're both having a really good spring.
Yeah.
One dude pitches 4 innings of like 1 hit or 2 hits or whatever it was, and then the next guy throws 4 scoreless innings of 1 hit. So it's very, very similar paths, totally different pitchers, of course, but similar paths and similar circumstances. So for me, it'd be hard to choose. I really like Peterson, actually, and maybe that's my bias talking, just because I wasn't here to see Megill in that string that he had last year, right? I was covering a different team at that time.
Right.
So I think I'm probably colored in that sense of like, I've seen Peterson. I kind of like his stuff. I've gotten to see games where he's pitched very effectively. Sure, I saw the game against the Cubs too, where he wasn't very effective that outing late in the season. but I've seen enough where it's like, okay, if that's the guy that you're going to, I understand like what's there to like about him. I get that. For Megill, for me, because I haven't personally seen it, that's coloring my vision a little bit. But when I look just on the raw numbers and the raw stuff, there's a lot to like about that guy's fastball. Like, and the fact that he's working on a curveball as well that's looked pretty sharp this spring. Yeah, he seems like a quality option when you're talking about your fifth or sixth guy. So that's why I go to the fact that maybe it's kind of a cop-out answer, but for me, it's my real one just because of like, maybe it does depend on the opponent. Like when they look at the schedule and they say, okay, like which of these guys, how else do you separate it? Because I don't know. I really don't.
It's a really good point. And before I throw it over to you, Ibby, jump back into the comments. Stevie Mac says it every week. I fail to say it. And this is the reminder. Hit the like button during the break. Obviously, we're out of the break.
Thumbs up.
It helps to do it now. Baseball and BBQ saying click that thumbs up. Yes, please do that. It helps the algorithm. Quite frankly, I'm too old to care to understand how. I know that
I'm trying to understand how.
You're a better person than me, Ibby. Not just for that, just in general. But I'm not even trying, to be honest. Baseball and BBQ follows it up by saying can never ever have enough pitching.
Never.
Which is true. It's one of those cliches that just you can always say it because it's always accurate. Some cliches get tired. That one just really, really stands out. Then makes a pretty good point, Baseball and BBQ, saying, I have an issue with older rotation. Remember when DeGrom, Harvey, Syndergaard, Wheeler, and Matz were all hurt in their 20s? The guy who took the ball every day was Bartolo Colon, ageless wonder. And I think, Ibby, there's a potential for that. Look, you look at guys like Verlander and Scherzer. I know they're getting older. I know the last 2 seasons, maybe you say Scherzer kind of petered out there at the end, maybe pitched a little too much or whatever, but these are guys who pitch and they pitch and they pitch and they pitch and they pitch. And that's what they're kind of known for. When you look around the league, like the age doesn't seem to matter. And, to Will's point, it kind of reminds me this Peterson Megill conversation. I know it didn't necessarily work out, but it reminds me a little bit of what Gesellman and Lugo did when they first came up in, I think it was 2016 when they filled in, where you're kind of like, look, you're going to pick spots. You're going to pick matchups. You're going to go with it. Sometimes guy's going to be a long relief. Sometimes you're going to bump them together. Use one guy as maybe not an opener per se, but you're going to use one guy to start the game and the other guy's going to be scheduled to come in next. And I think when you have a lefty-righty and they're both that talented, I think it's a pretty good spot to be in. It's listen, the depth matters and they have good depth.
Depth matters big time. We talked about that for multiple episodes, saying how to the point that was made that you can never have enough pitching. But when it comes to these two, I'm going to put it as based off the numbers that we're seeing, they're both having fantastic springs. I do think that Peterson is going to be the guy that ends up taking it. Now, we'll see what happens over the duration, the rest of the duration of camp. But right now I have Peterson out in front, mainly because I think that he is, I don't want to say safer, but if I'm comparing the two, I kind of look at it as I think that Peterson has the safer floor, whereas Megill has the higher ceiling. And I think that they're going to put it in a point where we're going to go with the guy. Like in general, I think the people that are going to end up breaking camp are going to be the ones that they feel safe with. I don't think they're going to take many chances. They're going to take the guys that they know are going to be in certain spots. I think Peterson, notches ahead of Megill in that conversation. They're going to go quote unquote safe to start. And then if something goes awry, they say, okay, now we can bring said player up, whether that is a Megill, whether that is a Beatty, whatever, and say, here's the reins, take it and run. I think that might be an approach that they might end up taking. But, to Peterson's credit, I don't want to make it seem like he's just like this average run-of-the-mill stale type of player. Look, last year, his called strikes with whiff percentage, he was about 28.4%. This year in the spring, he's up to about 31%. So he's clearly improving. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago how John Mincone said on Twitter that his arm slot seemed to be corrected as well. So we might finally get to see the David Peterson we all thought that he could potentially be. So I kind of have him barely in front right now. I also, to shout out to Tyler Megill, because we have spoke glowingly of him throughout the duration of the show's existence. We love what Tyler brings to the table. I would say that, the fact that he, thank you, Carlos. The fact that he is willing to live now in the 94, 95 area and become that pitcher that we've talked about, like he can be. Like we love when a guy comes out and is pumping 98, 99, 100 miles an hour, but maybe that's what ended up causing him to get a little bit banged up last year, a little bit hurt. And, being able to come back the way they did, it didn't really work out in the pen. Like everyone thought he would be this weapon because he threw so hard. Maybe he's better off living in this spot, pitching better as opposed to worrying so much on the radar gun, and he can, develop into something even more than what everyone thought he could be. I like the idea of Peterson being that first guy. And then if that happens to falter, or even to Will's plan or his idea of, mixing and matching, I'm fine with that as well. But I think that you might see Peterson as the guy to start. And if things go a little bit awry, saying, Megill, this is you, take it and run.
Yeah, you know what? And people in the comments are agreeing with both of you guys. Carlos Ramos saying, for the better of the team, I prefer Megill to start and Peterson out of the bullpen. I don't trust Megill out of the pen. So he's kind of flipped it, taking the agreement there. And he does have the bullpen stuff, though. That's what's best for the Mets. Then we've got Robert Wilkinson saying both Peterson and Megill are good choices. I might go with Peterson as the lefty, which brings me up to my point. Will, you said it's basically like a coin flip depending on matchup. I think when you look at it, Verlander right-handed, Scherzer right-handed, Senga right-handed, Cookie right-handed. Who is left-handed? Quintana. He's hurt. Why not just replace him with a lefty so you have a lefty presence in that rotation? To me, that's as good a reason as any. Maybe not the most educated baseball reason, but I do think it matters. Carlos Ramos saying, John, please, bro, mentioning Seth freaking Lugo is now illegal. You wanted me to play the heel. I wasn't even trying. I was just mentioning a guy. I was just trying to do it. That's all I was trying to do. And then Shay saying Peterson wins out, fill out the lefty slot, which is what I was alluding to. He tends to show up stronger against the above 500 teams. Also, Megill does too, but you see X factor with David Peterson. It's great conversation. Keep that coming in. Patty and NYC saying, I think it's Peterson. We got about 10 minutes to play with or so. Will, I want to ask you a question. I don't know if it's been brought up. It's been brought up in a couple places because the suddenly Italian, suddenly resurgent Matt Harvey is doing things in the WBC. Italian. I just don't know if he's Italian. I don't know. Nothing about Matthew Harvey screams particularly Italian to me, but he did grow the mustache. Maybe it's because the Mario Brothers movie is coming out. I'm just saying, listen, they got an espresso machine in the dugout. Yeah. They got Mike Piazza. They got Matt Harvey. I'm good. I'm in. Too. Listen, as an Italian kid from Brooklyn, I'm in. I'm not even really that Italian, but I'm in on the whole thing. Fine. But Matt Harvey's turning some heads. He's been able to pitch really well. Maybe he's finally learned how to be more of a pitcher that can get people out in that 89 to 91 range. So my question to you is, Will, is he back? That is the worst Photoshop job I've ever done, and it was partially
utilizing our Canva. That's what you did.
Listen to me. Is because I didn't really have time, and then when I realized how bad it was, I was like, that's even better. I'm keeping it. It's like last week with the AARP logo over Bartolo.
That was great. Listen, that was great.
No. So, Will, do you think Matt Harvey can be a viable major league pitcher at this stage of his career? And do you think there's some merit to maybe the Mets giving him a minor league deal, like the Mets being the team to say, hey, screw it, let's see if he's found it?
Yeah, I think Matt Harvey, if I was going to ask you, by the way, how long that took you to do. Yeah, it's excellent.
6 seconds. It was like the longest thing was finding a transparent Batman mask so I didn't have to remove the background.
That's efficient. But nah, man, he's given us a reason to tune in. I think that it's kind of cool to watch him pitch, right? Like that's cool. Mm-hmm. But I see him pitch, and I'm like, wow, he's kind of doing a good job here. He's kind of like you were saying, like kind of understanding how to throw into the zone, mix it up a little bit. I went to his baseball reference page, and I'm like, okay, well, how long has it really been, right? It's been a while. It's been a while. He's been a viable in any sense of the word. Unfortunately for him, and other teams have tried. I mean, the Royals gave him a shot. The Orioles gave him a shot.
Mm-hmm. And pretty legit shots. Sorry to interrupt. Like real shots on teams that didn't have a lot of pitching.
Right, and there's no harm in what you said, the minor league deal. Do I expect it to do? Would I expect it to work out? No. Unfortunately, I hope it would. I hope it would for him. That'd be really cool. And you like to see it unfold like this way, where he kind of breaks out in WBC. It's pretty remarkable if that's the case. But unfortunately, it's like, you look at the body of work of the last major league seasons, and it's like I don't know enough to know what changed. and like what he's continuing to refine or fix or, implement with his pitch mix, whatever. I don't know those answers to those questions, so it's not for me to judge or say, but I'm just looking at it objectively, like from a number standpoint of like what he's produced. Like I just don't see the hope in it from that sense. But yeah, that would be a nice little story for sure.
I honestly, Ibby, like for me, that's all it would be. I know it's pure nostalgia, and I know people have mixed feelings on Matt Harvey. I've always liked Matt Harvey. I have fond memories of his contributions to this team after the Tommy John surgery, coming back in 2015, pitching more innings than anybody had to that point after coming back from Tommy John in year one. I know it didn't work out in that World Series game, but like he gave everything to this team quite literally. Is that the reason why he had that thoracic outlet syndrome? Probably not, but it feels like a weird correlation. And I just think there's a little bit for me of me saying, it doesn't even necessarily have to work out. I wish it would work out for Matt Harvey, A, in general, B, with the Mets. That'd be such a cool story. But I think it's such a low risk, low reward, like a low risk proposition to just be like, hey, you know what? Here's a minor league deal. Let's try to smooth over the fact that like things ended unceremoniously. Am I being too much of a sweetheart, Ibby, with this?
I was gonna say it's not just you with the Mets. I think that's just baseball fans being romantics in general. Like like Will was saying, it's like it's a story that you want to read. Like you want it to happen. You want this to actually work out. And I'm kind of on Will's side with this one, where it's just like I appreciate what the guy did when he was here. Do I think it would work out? I don't know, and I'm not really sure if it means that.
I didn't mean to do that.
I was just gonna watch you drink. I thought it was gonna be good. I don't know if it means that if he catches on with someone, if he's gonna take this lightning in a bottle that he has at this moment with his his Italian roots, if you will, that he's going to bring to whichever team he might go to. Do I think it would be the Mets? I don't know if they would go back to that route. And I can see Shay's comment in the comment section talking about not wanting to really revisit and, wanting to move forward and not always thinking about what happened in the past, which a lot of Mets fans do. Same thing when Mets fans are always very attached to their prospects because they want the homegrown player, things in that sense. Do I think it'd be a great story? I do. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't. If anything, it's great to see a guy get his life back together with all that he's gone through. Do I think inputting him back into New York City is the right thing to do? I don't. And look, everyone grows, everyone matures. Maybe he could handle that. And I wish him all the best because I'm with you, John. I appreciate everything he did when he was here. 2015 was a magical run. I was there, Game 5. That game was incredible. Didn't end the way we wanted it to, but it was still incredible. And guy gave literally his arm for the franchise. But I still think if he wants to pitch in Major League Baseball, I think it's probably better off catching on elsewhere as opposed to coming back to New York.
That's fair. I mean, Carlos Ortiz saying maturity is what changed. Hopefully he's there. And I'll bring back Shay's comment before I throw it to Will one final time when we get out of here. But he said, don't bring back Matt Harvey, the one you alluded to. I appreciate his time with the Mets, but the reunion tour is not needed. How do we move forward as an organization if we keep wanting the past, him, Conforto, etc.? And then followed it up by saying, it's like the ex you just can't get over, let him go. And it's funny because I'm usually the one, Will, you wouldn't know this, Ibby, you do, that's like, no, we can cut bait. I don't want to revisit these guys. I think the difference with Harvey is that it seems like such a low risk proposition. Again, for me, it's like, you give him a minor league deal. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's just another thing that didn't work out and it's all good. With like Conforto, it was like, well, you have to pay this guy. You have to decide whether or not you want to reward this player, just based on the fact that, I always said, I like Michael Conforto. He seems like a really nice guy, but he had a few big moments. He had 2 home runs in a World Series game. He made an all-star team one year. He had 30 home runs one other year. Other than that, 6 pretty mediocre, unhealthy years overall for somebody who I think was worthy to get $20 million a year or in that ballpark, but not necessarily from the Mets when you wanted him to be more. You wanted him to be a more consistent number 3 hitter type of player, and that wasn't the kind of player that he was. So I'm usually the one that can say, let's move on from these guys, but I don't know, something about Harvey, it just seems like such a, you give him a minor league deal. If it doesn't work out, whatever, he winds up, pitching for Team New Zealand next time. Who knows? I don't know. That said, look, we got about 2 minutes or so. Don't want to take up too much of your time, Will. I know you're going back to Port St. Lucie tomorrow, you said. So what are you looking forward to here on the rest of spring training? Like, is there a player you want to see? Is there something that, in your opinion, not reporting, not breaking anything, but is something in your opinion like Met fans should really look out for this guy or this position battle or somebody you've enjoyed watching, anything like that over the next couple of weeks of spring training before we get started?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely covered the Megill Peterson situation pretty thoroughly.
Sure.
That's obviously at the top of my list for things to watch. I'm also kind of curious, like how we mentioned him a little bit before about him being kind of forgotten, but just like what the level of difference is between, like, say, Francisco Alvarez's defense, where that was in the beginning of camp versus where it is like right now. I'm curious to kind of ask around about on that and see what people think. Also, like Kodai Senga, like that's the guy that I'm most looking forward to watching, just from a strictly like baseball fan perspective. Like I want to see what he has, more than just that little short start with against the Cardinals a couple weeks ago or last week, whenever it was. So like he's the guy that I want to see him pitch a little bit more. I want to see him get into like 3-4 innings, kind of see what he looks like that second time through the order, even if we can get that far down the road with it. So like that to me is like my top 2 or 3 things that I'll be monitoring ahead of this like last couple of weeks. We're almost there before the ramp up to opening day.
I'm looking forward to it. I said that was the last question, but I do have a follow-up for you if you have a second. What do you think about Kodai Senga? I know you haven't seen him that much, but when the Mets signed him, there was a lot of fanfare because, all the accolades from Japan. And look, we've seen some great pitchers come over from Japan, Tanaka and Nomo. And then we've seen the Kayagawas of the world. We've seen the Hideki Arabus of the world where, guys who couldn't put it together here. So it's sort of a boom or bust proposition when you go and you reach big. And go get a Japanese star pitcher. So what were your thoughts when the Mets initially signed him?
I thought it made sense. I really did. I think that a lot of people, their knee-jerk reaction is like, wow, this is great because he's kind of a shiny new toy situation where it's like, no matter what, like nobody really is going to dig into like, okay, who is this guy? They see the highlights. They see like Ghost Fork Splitter. It's like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. Sign us up. And it was at a time where like, Brandon Nimmo had just re-signed and like, the Verlander off of that in the winter meetings and Jose Quintana signing and additions to the bullpen. So like it just like kept going and going. So it was like a fun time to kind of monitor things. And I think that kind of skewed some opinions and just all of a sudden it was like the greatest thing ever to sign Kodai Senga. It was a pretty solid contract. That said, like you're not paying him all that much. You're paying him pretty much what, dollar per year basis of like what a mid rotation guy would get in this market. So like it's not, from a financial standpoint, it's not like a huge commitment, like something that's would even be crippling. Like obviously with the Mets and Steve Cohen, it's not gonna be crippling no matter what. But even for like an average team, it wouldn't be that crippling. So like it gives you that. The question is like, was he better than the alternatives? That's gonna be the question that we're gonna face every time he pitches. Is he better than a Chris Bassett? Because Chris Bassett was a known commodity. You knew what you were getting there. Whereas with Kodai Senga, he's unknown. He's somebody that you're taking a chance on a little bit based on your forecast, based on your scouting. Now, all of that said, I like him a lot. I think he has the stuff to be really good in the major leagues. I think he took the initiative and he went to Driveline over the winter after he signed, and he even met with those folks during his tour of teams to kind of understand like, okay, this is how my pitches are going to play with this ball. It's going to be different. How do I, make necessary changes to get the best out of myself? It says a lot about the guy to be able to do that and to take that initiative. So I like that. So I like his personality. I think it's a good fit for the Mets. I think it's a good fit for New York, guy who's worked his butt off to kind of get here. And so, yeah, I think it's a good sign for what it is. He's going to pitch behind Max and Justin Verlander, a little bit less of a stressor, knowing that they're going to do the heavy lifting there. Can he be an impact arm? I think so. I really think he can. I think it's going to take some time. And I think it's going to be some peaks and valleys with it. I think there's going to be some times where it's just not going to look that great, where his command fails him and he fails to pitch deep into games. I think that's going to happen, but I also think that there's going to be some better, more impressive outings than poor outings.
I like that. I like that for everything that you just said. I think the contract for the for what he's supposed to be on this team, which is a third starter, I think is completely appropriate. And I also think, there's probably going to be some bumps in the road, but he's going to be on a staff for at least the full season, probably 2, with both Verlander and Max Scherzer. He can learn from them. He doesn't have to be the ace until at least one of them is gone. And who knows, we might even have Shohei Ohtani. That's another conversation for another day. I do want to say, Will, obviously we thank you for being on the show. But a lot of comments. Robert Wilkins, Will has been great. Please have him back. Shay saying agreed, and Patty and NYC saying same. So, I like to give folks we joke around and we have, some serious baseball conversation. We also have some fun along the way, but I do like to give folks their flowers when they come in. So, that said, Ibby, you have any final thoughts? Anything you want to throw Will's way before we get out of here?
I got nothing else. Just as always, I've been saying it to him nonstop in the DMs. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I'm very happy that everyone else enjoyed you coming on as well. I really like your writing, which is why I really wanted to have you on. So please keep doing your thing. I didn't really get a chance to talk to you about it, but I loved your article about Nimmo and two-way center fielders. I thought that was fantastic. So just keep doing your thing. And if you ever want to come back on, please, the invite is always there.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Great show.
Will, really, really, really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Will Sammon of The Athletic. Will, one more time, let them know where they can find you on Twitter and all that stuff, because I don't want to spell your last name wrong when I try to give out your handle.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks again. I'm at Will Sammon, so it's WILLSAMMON. And again, I appreciate it, guys. It's been a fun chat. Happy to do it again anytime soon.
Awesome, man. Well, safe travels down to Port St. Lucie, and hopefully you bring some good tidings along with you. I know that's not necessarily, your job as somebody who writes about the team, but, hopefully you bring some good vibes down there with you. And, our Mets can get out of the rest of spring training, mostly in one piece. And
unscathed.
And then we can start the season and we can get on a mission for a World Series. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for tuning in, watching live, commenting, all that stuff. Hit the thumbs up like Stevie Mac always says. I will screw that up if he doesn't say it. So thank you every week for reminding me. Of course, if you didn't have a chance to watch us live or you tuned in late, as soon as we end the broadcast, you can check out the entire episode on our YouTube channel, which is called Till Mets Do Us Part. And if you can't even do that, don't worry. Tomorrow morning, you can listen to the entire show as an audio podcast, wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. So you can listen on your way to work, to school, while you're at the gym, all of that fun stuff. It's John Sapanaro. It's Matt Ibby Ibanez. Our guest this week, Will Sammon from The Athletic, talking all things New York Mets until Mets do us part. We'll see you all next week. Peace.